na 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 na. Bamba. Oh na 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 na. Bamba. Oh na 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 na. Bamba. Oh na 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 na. Big it up. Oh na 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 na. Big it up. Oh na 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 na. Bamba. Bamba 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 de. Bamba bamba. Bamba mi de. Bamba 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 mi de. Bamba bamba. Bamba mi bamba bamba bamba. Bamba mi de.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to Home and Away Jamaica, where we connect Jamaica with the diaspora. We want to thank our viewers and listeners for tuning in each week. And we thought that today would be very useful to have our viewers' questions answered. And so today we're going to have Jermaine Peart, one of our viewers, ask a particular question. Stacey Salmon, I'd like to welcome Stacey, managing partner of Taylor Law. Stacey will be joining me today on today's program, and together we will be addressing some of our viewers' questions. So in our first segment, we're going to answer a question that Jermaine will pose, and then when Jermaine leaves the show, we are going to address some other questions that have come in to us. So welcome again. Morning, Jermaine. Welcome to Home and Away Jamaica.
Morning, guys.
Hi,
Thanks for
morning.
having me. All right. So the question I had was in relation to the land, what's the best way to find the owner for a piece of land?
All right. So, Jermaine, just so that we set the stage, you are asking if you have identified land, let's say presumably you want to purchase the land or take some other steps with the land, you want to know who the owner is of that land so you can make contact.
That is correct.
Okay.
All right. So, Jermaine, where exactly is the property located?
In Washington Gardens.
In Washington Gardens. Are there any surrounding properties?
Yes, there's lots, well, not empty lots, but occupied residence.
All right. So, my first thing I would do in trying to contact the owner of a property that has presumably abandoned it, I would first ask the surrounding neighbors if they have any, contact details for the owner of the property, find out, how long ago they were last occupying the premises. Have you done that?
Yes. No one had seen or knows the property owner. So I did check to see if the taxes were paid as well. They haven't been paid in the last 7 years. So my next step, or what I'm thinking of, is to put an ad in the real estate section in the newspaper.
Right. So that would be the next step. So if the neighbors are unable to, provide any contact details for the owner, what you would do, you'd place a whereabouts ad in the paper, whether the Observer or the Gleaner, just stating that so-and-so person of X address, you're being asked to contact Jermaine Peart and your contact details. The cost of placing the ad in the paper is approximately maybe between 5,000 and 6,000 Jamaican dollars. And you probably want to run the ad for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Just so they, the appropriate persons, just to get more exposure, I would say, and increase the likelihood of someone responding to the ad.
Jermaine, is this raw land or is it a residence, a single family residence?
A raw land.
Oh, it's raw land. Is it between two houses, or is it sitting or standing on its own?
Yeah, it's a corner lot.
Okay, so it's a corner lot. And so no visible signs of any construction on that land before?
No, and it's not fenced.
And it's not fenced. Now, have you been able to get the volume and folio number, which are the numbers that identify the registered title of the land?
Yes, and I found where the owner used to reside when she purchased the land. So I'll be going there next to find out if I can find contact with the owner.
Okay, so when you were able to retrieve the volume and folio number, you retrieved a copy of the title from the title's office. Is that what you did?
Yes,
And then you were able to look on the title and you saw the ownership endorsed on the title
correct,
with the person's address.
correct.
Okay, so from there, you're going to visit that address to see if the person still resides there.
That is correct.
So you haven't done that yet.
No.
Okay, so that would probably be the first step before putting an ad in the paper. Were you able to determine the actual date of the transfer? The endorsement on the title would have a transfer date.
Yes, I have it right here. It was 1995.
Okay, 1995. Well, that's still not too long ago, but it's still in the distant past, depending on probably the age of the person at the time they purchased.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like, just for the benefit of our other viewers and listeners. So what Jermaine did, he identified land that he had an interest in. He was able, presumably from the lot number, if there is a civic address, and the civic address is that lot number that's posted on the gate. Usually lot numbers go up in two. Sometimes there is A and B in some schemes like 12A, 12B. And so if you can get the number of the lot next to the lot that you're trying to identify, then more than likely you can identify that lot, or you can go to the titles, the registrar of titles, and they can bring up that particular subdivision and you can identify the land or that particular lot and the title, and from that, the volume and folio number, you would pull a copy of the title, and the title has all the details as it relates to successive ownership of the land right through to the last chain of ownership. So in this case, Jermaine was able to look on title. He saw an endorsement of the last transfer in the 1990s, which had the person's name and their address. So his next attempt will be to visit that address and see whether the person still lives there or persons who live there know of that person. If not, we've also suggested to Jermaine he can put an ad in the paper to determine whether that person or persons connected with the land view the notice and can get in touch with Jermaine.
All right. And one question before I go, because I know we're pressed for time. If it is that we can't find the owner and the owner is deceased, or if it is that we find that the owner is deceased, what would be the next step?
One step would be to determine if that owner has any beneficiaries. If there is an estate, that person may have had a will, and then the persons in that will, the intended beneficiaries, would be entitled to the land. In most instances, or in many instances, it wouldn't be unlikely that those persons, having not taken any steps to deal with the land, may not be opposed to selling the land. So you would then need to contact those persons.
All right. But the thing is, how would I find out if the person is deceased? Because that's where I'm the tricky part.
One of the other things you could do, Jermaine, is on the title, the person who owned the land before,
Okay.
you could try and make contact with that person. That person may have more details as it relates to the purchaser, the person who purchased from them, because an agreement for sale, a contract presumably had been drafted, and there may be contact details that may not be readily apparent on the title that the person who last sold the land may have.
All right, awesome.
So what we would suggest is that you take those steps, Jermaine. If for some reason it doesn't bear fruit, give us a call and we can recommend some other steps that you could possibly take.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Jermaine. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your experience. And of course, good luck.
Thank you. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Stacey. You enjoy the rest of the day.
You
Thanks.
too. Thanks, Jermaine.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so that was Jermaine Peart, and Jermaine had some questions related to some of our earlier programs on land. And what we're going to do today, and Stacey is going to help in addressing some of the questions that have been raised. We have two questions, one on adverse possession. And we've, spoken about that before. We've used the term squatting, which I think is more the pervasive term. So one person has asked a question. This person has said, I'm in the process of starting adverse possession. The land has no building and bushy from the 1990s. And my family and I have been maintaining it since I was 10. I'm now 30, so 20 years have passed. The land is located in St. Catherine. What are the current steps to make this adverse possession application, Stacey?
All right, so the first thing that you want to do when you're going to commence an application for adverse possession is to engage the services of a surveyor. The surveyor will prepare a survey report and a plan that will be submitted to the Survey and Mapping Division at the NLA. So the plan will identify the boundaries of the property.
And the NLA, for viewers, is the National Land Agency.
Right, the National Land Agency.
Mm-hmm.
And the Survey and Mapping Department will check the plan and confirm that the boundaries identified in the surveyor's plan is correct. The next document that you need to proceed with your application is a valuation report. So the valuation report will state the current market value of the property. This is required by the National Land Agency to determine the applicable registration fees. So the initial fee to commence your application is 1% of the market value of the property. Now, the application must clearly state how it is that the interest that you're claiming is a sufficient or a valid claim to have your name endorsed on title, have the title issued in your name. So you'd first have to establish that you've been in possession of the property for at least 12 years. What steps you have taken to claim ownership. For example, you said that you've been clearing the land because it's bushy, there is no building, the payment of property taxes, erecting a fence to establish that you are in fact the true owner. You'd also need 2 independent persons who have known the property for at least 30 years and up to corroborate your claim of ownership to the property. So these 2 persons, preferably persons that are neighboring or adjoining owners, will speak to the fact that this property was previously owned by X, it was abandoned, or the person died in such and such a year, and you took possession in 1990, and you are now the rightful owner entitled to make a claim of interest to the property and to have a title issued in your name.
Was that about complete the steps, Stacey?
Right. So once you have all those documents compiled, you submit your application to the National Land Agency. The registrar will vet the documents. If the documents are in order, it will be further sent to what's called the referee of titles. So the referee of titles will adjudicate based on the documents that you've submitted to see if you have established that you have a valid claim of ownership. If in his opinion, he agrees that your ownership, the claim of ownership is valid, he will provisionally approve your application. If your application is provisionally approved, he'll direct you to advertise in the paper that you are making this application, and anyone who is against or is claiming or is objecting, I should say, to your claim of interest has the opportunity to lodge what's called a caveat to prevent your application from going forward. So after your ad is placed in the paper, the tear sheets, so those are the sheets that the ads are published on in the paper, will have to be submitted to the titles office at the National Land Agency, and the referee will approve your title and direct the registrar to issue a new title in your name.
So Stacey, it seems then, because the question we get quite often from persons is, they say, well, I've been paying the property taxes, can I adverse possession? But certainly from what you've just described, there is a process, and paying the property taxes is just one element of a list of other limbs that have to be satisfied for the referee to grant that provisional order.
Right, that's one important document that I inadvertently omitted, which is the property tax certificate, which establishes that there are no outstanding property taxes on the property. The referee will not approve your application unless the property taxes are paid up to date. And as you rightfully said, if you pay up the property taxes without establishing your claim of interest or ownership in the property, that in and of itself will not be sufficient to have a title issued in your name. So it's combined with all the other elements and aspects that I explained previously.
And Stacey, if we wanted to make things just a little more complex, we could add the proposition where the land has no registered title. And so if it's unregistered title, dual application would have to be made for adverse possession, as well as an application to bring that unregistered title to first registration, as in to have title issued.
Right, that's correct. So if it is that you're adversely possessing a property with no title, you're unable to prove who that registered owner is, instead of proving 12 years occupation, the referee will require 30 years to establish your claim of ownership.
Great, Stacey, thanks for that, particularly that clarification as it relates to claim of ownership. And as it relates to crown lands owned by the government, what's the duration of possession?
Right, so you would have to prove that you've been in occupation of that property owned by the government for a period of 60 years.
Okay, so the bar has been raised when it relates to crown land.
Right.
So Stacey, we have one other question, and it relates to the municipal corporation planning regulations. We had a show one day with a guest, and our guest spoke about the various steps in getting approval for construction, building approval. Now, this question is, if the title under the restrictive covenants section does not indicate anything about multifamily construction, does this mean it can be allowed? So just to provide some context, when approvals are issued for building and construction, the municipal corporation, which we now use that term, the parish council, will issue its conditions of approval for that particular development or single family unit to go ahead. Those conditions of approval are then summarized and included on the title, the registered title. So when you look on a registered title, and maybe what we can do one show is actually show what the registered title looks like. There is the ownership information, but there's also a section on the title that lists a number of covenants. And the covenants are basically provisions enforced by the regulators, the agencies, as it relates to what dealings you can make with the land. So you have restrictive covenants that may say particular boundaries must be a certain distance. Certain things cannot go on the land. For example, no church, no school. Some covenants may say that the land cannot be subdivided, and so on and so forth. Now, in this instance, the person has asked, or viewer has asked about multifamily construction. So if a registered title has a restrictive covenant that says no further subdivision, means you cannot divide, let's say, a 1 acre lot into further splinters or further subdivided lots to issue more titles. And if it does, then you have to apply to the courts and seek permission to modify this covenant to allow for multiple lots. So this question says, suppose the title is silent. There is no covenant that speaks to subdividing the land. And maybe, Stacy, just in the interest of time, I'll take this one. And where the covenant is silent, what we would need to rely on is the development orders. So the National Environment and Planning Agency, through the Town and Country Planning Agency, issues development orders for each parish. And the development order will prescribe what a particular zone or community is allowed to what development is allowed in that particular area. So while the title may be silent, the Town and Country development order may state that that area is reserved for agricultural lands, it may be reserved for commercial units, or no single family, no multifamily developments are going to be allowed in that area. So one of the things we would suggest that anyone faced with that situation do is write to the National Environment and Planning Agency and seek a no objection. Give some indication as to what you want to do with the land and ask whether that use will be permitted, and seek their no objection, meaning they will grant approval to say you can now proceed to take steps to make the relevant applications that you seek, because we have no objection to what is being sought. Stacey, we have about a minute. Anything to add?
Sure, I think you covered it. You covered it well. I don't have anything to add, no.
Okay, great. Well, we are going to wrap up. Stacey, thanks for, as usual, providing your very detailed input. And we just want to say to all our viewers and listeners, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, belated Christmas, Happy New Year when it comes. 2020 was a difficult year. We give God thanks for making it through, and we, notwithstanding, look forward to the opportunities that next year will present. Thanks, Stacey. Bye for now. Bye to all our viewers and listeners. Home and Away Jamaica.
Bam, bam.